Hi, welcome to A Word with Kelly Scott Reed, Roy Fagnan's interview show where I get to talk to creative writers, poets, filmmakers, podcasters, and those who make the magic that makes this life worth living. I'm happy to welcome Amy Marques. Grew up, she grew up between languages and cultures and learned from an early age that multiplicity of narratives. She has published numerous short fiction and visual poetry and art. She's a Pushcart Prize, Best of the Net, and Best Small Fictions nominee, and editor and artist of the Duets Anthology. Amy's poem RSVP has actually appeared in the Raw Fagnan blog, which we're very proud to say. And Amy's first full poetry collection, Parts, was released via Full Moon on August 13th. So I'd like to welcome you, Amy, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I say us like I'm multiple people.
You represent multiple people.
Yes, I represent the press.
Yes.
I'm truly not insane. There's really only one me. So Amy, give me a little insight about your latest publication, how it came to be, what inspired you.
So like many of my things, it was a complete accident. It starts with my foot, really. I had an ankle injury and I teach university, and I find that office hours can be really stifling, like sitting at a desk. And I'm a physician by training, so I also tried to do that with patients, a pediatrician in another life. And so I'd like play with the kids and hang out with the parents and do things in a more organic way. And when I learned that I had to do office hours as a university professor, the thought of like sitting there and then students coming in and that formality, it stifles the conversation. So one of the things that I do frequently was like, let's go for a walk. Because the idea of walking and talking, you don't have to do eye to eye, contact. The pauses in conversation are never awkward because you're walking, you see distracting things. There's like it gives people time to kind of collect their thoughts, especially if there's a power imbalance. So I had a student who would frequently do walk and talks, and she reached out over the summer. She was like, can we go for a walk and talk? And I'm like, I'm in a boot, can't walk. She's like, do you watercolor? And I said, never watercolored in my life. I probably did as a kid, but I didn't remember. She's like, I'll bring my stuff. And she literally brought boxes and boxes of like paints of all kinds and pastels and whatever. I had not even a brush and I didn't have paper. So we quickly ran out of paper and we're like talking and watercoloring. And I had old literary journals, the kind when you've read through them. And there was like, you've pulled out because we can't keep them all, right? So I pulled out the pages I wanted. So we started painting on those. And I realized that sometimes words would it felt like they popped out. And I thought I had discovered something, but it turns out found poetry is an actual thing. And I was like, oh, and I'm like, I always tell my son that one of the humbling things about being a reader is that whatever you think of, somebody has thought of before and done it better. So that same month, the Bennington Review published Mary Ruefle's profile. And she's just like, she's been doing this forever and magnificently, and she modifies whole books. So I was like, oh, I want to do that. So I took a Thomas Wolfe book that had been just kind of lying there, and it's long and wordy. And that was what I started to do. I had no idea what I was doing. I still don't. And so I was using, scraps and learning how to use material. I'd pull stuff out of the trash can. So many pages were done with toilet paper as my paintbrush. I cannot even begin to count how many. And so like Parts really was kind of my learning to become a visual artist, and at the same time kind of treasuring words in a different way. And it creates a fun constraint, like that page has to work. And also the idea of doing a full book means you can't skip pages. You need to wait for a page to dry, so you can't rush it. Like you can do an unopened page and you have to wait for that to dry before you move on. And that exercise there were so many things about it, like you have to live with what you've created, you have to wait before you move on, you have to use whatever words are on the page. So all of those little things were kind of a really fun journey. I actually have it here with me. I had to deconstruct it to so this is the original book. And like I wrote parts on it, and I don't know if you can see it, like here it was written "Party at Jack's," and then I literally like blocked it out so it turns into parts. And I
Oh,
had
wow.
to, yeah, I had to pull out the pages to create the pictures, but like you can see that each page is literally a page of the book, and it's like all done on the page. So I approached it like a fearless kindergartner. You know how kindergartners don't care. You give them a blank piece of paper and they're like all in and splash paint on it with no, that's how I did this book. So
That is so funny because I'm finding as you're just speaking, a lot of connections, one of them being found poetry. I've never heard of it before, like, well, I've heard of it, but never really explored it. A friend of mine was finding back during the pandemic a total block in my life, like creative
uh,
block. It's all physical. I am a yoga instructor. As you were talking about being in medicine, I was reading The Anatomy of Movement because that's what a nerd I am. So I get that vibe from you. But then also the found poetry said, why don't you try doing some found poetry? Maybe that will unleash something, because I couldn't do it. My brain wasn't allowing me to. And as you're saying that, it's the constraints. It
yes,
was the having to slow down, which are
yes,
things that I'm not great at. And it's just amazing to hear that
yes.
that what you're saying there. That's just so interesting to me. I
And
found
the
it to be the same
constraints
thing.
are, there was another constraint that was, I actually I wrote a little like essay in Wild Roof as a Substack, maybe it can be linked, about one of the pages was really meaningful for me. It was probably page 5 or 6 that I did. And I had done something before using my fingers to make these little dots, and I loved the page. So here I am trying to replicate it, as we do with so many things in life, right? We do something, we're like, this was cool, I'm doing it again, and then it doesn't work. And you're like, ugh. And it was awful. Like it was ugly. I didn't like the page, but the page before it was my favorite page. So now I'm like, I can't throw this out. It's not like a blank piece of paper. It's not like a draft that you wrote and you're like, oh, this is a throwaway story. Like you have to work with it. And so I kept layering on top of it and creating things on top of it until finally I liked what I ended up with. Um, and again, like there's just, as you were saying, like sometimes when you're working through something in your mind, stuff just pops in. And I say that words haunt me, literature haunts me. And now I think just like the world haunts me. So at that time, a profile came out in the New Yorker, forgot the artist's name, but he works with sediments. So he literally like layers, 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 and then he scrapes off. So like what is beneath will always come to the surface. And and again, it's like everything is a metaphor, right? The more you start thinking about it, you're like, it's all connected and woo woo. But I'm not trying to be woo woo. It's just the page is there. You can't erase it. You can't start over. You have to work with what is. And if you mess it up, you have to live with your mistakes, which doesn't mean leaving it that way. So it was also kind of a metaphor for life, right? Like you mess up, what you learned from that mistake and kind of the consequences of that mess up, you'll carry with you, but that doesn't mean you have to stay in the mistake and you know, stay messed up. So it's one of my favorite pages now. I love it, but it took like extra work. So some places are easy and some just kind of pop into existence, and others are like, yeah, we're pulling this out and we're adding this thing and then we're covering it up and we're like, you know, creating. But there are layers, and that kind of plays into everything. But the slowing down is pretty magical too. I think there's something about like staring at a page, thinking about it, waiting, and yeah.
What would be the most surprising thing you learned about yourself during that process of creating this poetry collection? Um, what was the most surprising thing? Something that you didn't already know about yourself?
So I think before I started this, I would have called myself a fledgling writer. Like I'd always known I wanted to write someday. And I'd always been a reader, but I had never aspired to art or poetry. I find poetry incredibly intimidating. I think poets are brilliant, but like scary, and it's scary not in a bad way, just like really intimidating, like, you know, that they're magical, because it's like the highest, whatever. And art was just so elusive for me that I was that person who, if somebody said something was beautiful, I had to believe them and I needed their words to explain it to me. So I think by the end of parts, I was calling myself both an artist and a poet. And I needed other people to say it first. I didn't, like, I'm not that enlightened. But I started to believe in myself as an artist and a poet. And that was really, really magical. It was kind of a, I believe I have taste now. I look at visual art and I have an opinion, like, and I can own the good or bad of, whether, and just playing with words in a fun way. It was also really good for my journey as a writer in general, because it was a reminder of, even Thomas Wolfe's words can be desecrated into something else. Like there is no, I had people hold on to the book and say, we do not write in books, like this is a sin, and give it back to me like, what are you doing? But it's also kind of liberating if you're cutting somebody else's words, somebody revered in literature, right? Like he's an amazing writer. And here I am erasing so many of his words, but it still shines through. There's still an essence there that you can subvert it, you can condense it, but it still shines through. And that's the magic of words. And then it makes you braver about cutting your own. It's like, it doesn't matter. The essence of it will kind of come to the surface. And yeah.
It's very Zen, like the broken glass theory. Nothing is permanent. There is no permanence. So even his words are not necessarily permanent. And then yours and onward and onward. If you look at the glass is always broken, even before it breaks, you learn to love it for its essence at that point. And then when it breaks, that's what happens. Like, I think that's cool. It's like letting go. You were talking earlier before we started recording about, just letting go of your own judgments of yourself or any the self-critic inside you as well. Could you expound on that a little bit?
Yeah. I think there's, I even mentioned an age thing. I don't think it's necessarily age related, but I think we all have kind of a process in becoming ourselves, right? And I think there are some paths in life that kind of have these milestones and markers, like you have to achieve this and you need this degree and you need, like certifications, whatever it is. And in a previous life, that's kind of the path I followed. And there were these very specific markers, and there's ways to judge success or non-success. And art isn't supposed to be like that, I don't believe, but it is. As a business, it is, right? Like, and as an academic progression, it is. And we have markers for success that are sometimes money or acclaim or whatever it is. But coming into this in midlife with my son was already a teenager by the time I started writing. So even as, a parent and already having a job. So I also didn't need to reach certain markers these are huge privileges to make art from that place. And being able to do that meant that I could pick and choose what my markers for success were. And that was incredibly liberating. I need to remind myself, because I think it's so easy when we're in community to kind of like, and this goes for any measure of success in society, right? Like what is success? I was literally just on the phone with one of my students now, like trying to, what did I do next? And I'm like, let's backtrack. Like, what's your end goal? But people say, I'm like, no, where do you envision yourself? And I do that with myself from an art and writing path. And it's liberating, because then it's like, it doesn't matter what the conventional markers are. And my personal goals are to connect and to connect with people, and to, to be read, to leave something that looks like me in the world. And that has become increasingly messy and quirky. And I called it amateurish once, and somebody said, well, anything amateur just means it's made with love. And I'm like, yes.
Oh, that's going to actually be, how they have live, laugh, love, or home. I'm going to put amateurish up over my like door. I think that's a great sentiment. I love again, we talk about it in yoga, actually, coming in with a beginner's mind, coming into even the physical asana with a beginner's mind. And I think that if you approach your art, whether that's in writing or in visual arts and even dance, to learn, you're learning as you go. It just improves and improves.
That's so perfect what you said about beginner, because so I've played piano since I was 5. and I do not do it well. So when you think of like the musician, the writer, and the visual artist is the least trained. I have no clue what I'm doing. I don't know color theory. I've done nothing. Like, and I start doing things. I'm like, I don't want to know. Like this, I like there's a rawness there that's connecting. And sometimes that's being more successful than like the prose writing that was intentional and like I'm studying the craft of it or whatever. Or like piano, I've been doing it forever and I literally freeze up. If there's somebody there, there's no soul. I might hit all the notes and it's like, where is the. So I recently accidentally tumbled into kind of singing lessons. And I hadn't sung since I sang in choir as a little kid. And it was such a reminder, like the piano and prose and kind of like the singing and the visual art kind of made sense in my head, because the singing instructor at one point said, I don't want it to sound good. Like, I don't want perfect. I just want real. And I thought, oh my God, that is so it, right? Like the soul of things. Sometimes things are just technically perfect. You hit every note. It sounds all, or you're constructing your sentences beautifully and perfectly, but there's something about raw emotion or just authenticity and just the real. And I think that's part of the magic of beginners, right? I think we've all seen somebody who you look at them and you're like, ooh, they could be really, really good. And they're not quite there yet, but you see it. And sometimes we polish that out, or we edit it out, or we craft it out. And so I've been trying with visual art to like hold on to that amateurishness and kind of stay having fun and just keep my beginner fun mentality.
Do you or have you seen Myra Kalman?
I don't
Have you
think
heard
so.
of that name? All right, I'll send it to you.
Yes,
As you're
please.
speaking and as I'm seeing your work, I'm going to show you what she does. So she does visual art,
Uh-huh.
these incredible, almost primitive paintings. One of my favorite books I read, my son, was Ooh La La, Max in Love. And it was a child's book. It was all her paintings, but like these really cool story in the background. And she does incredible books. And I'm going to make sure I send you that information. But that's
Thank
what, there's a definitely a, there's a spark in, even after all the years that she's been doing, a little bit of a spark. Like she'll just paint a picture of a cake and then tell you that she was at a birthday one day and this is what the cake looked like. And it's just, but it's written so beautifully and it just touches you on a level from when you were younger and just have been seeing these things for the first time. And I think that that's kind of, I think what I'm getting from your work when I'm looking at it, and I'm like, this is something that's tickling in me, something that may have long been dormant.
Oh, I love that. And I
You know
love
what
how
I
you
mean?
said like the scene for the first time. I was talking about like walking with students. I wrote this entire little like it's not a visual, it's almost like a graphic poem, and it's all like bird poop and sidewalk cracks because like bird poop is real art. It's like abstracty art. So we'd be walking and I'd be like, oh heart. And the ones who walk with me frequently got used to it. Sounds insane, but it is kind of like that childish wonder of just seeing the world. And you'll see it in clouds, but sidewalk cracks work too. So yeah, there's something fun about that and just kind of seeing shapes and yeah. It's and I think the more we do it, the better we get at it, and we can contaminate people. Like after a while, people are like, "Oh, I saw it too," and you're like, "Yay!" And it's
Mhm.
it. I don't know how we look at the world. And I could go all like technical on this, but I do believe that our narratives we construct. So if we want to do it from a literary perspective, I don't remember, was it Toni Morrison who said that you can't change the facts, but you can change the tone of the narrative of your life. And I think how
Mm.
we look at things and how we tell the story, and part of that is the wonder and just noticing these little details. It adds a layer of fun. So you asked me before, like what I learned about myself. I think I can now call myself a poet and an artist, but I think the filter of artistry has changed how I just live all my little moments. It's been super fun.
And to take it in a little different direction, part of what crushes souls is criticism in some
Yes.
level. But is there been any helpful criticism, or what would you say would have been the most helpful criticism you've received, either with your art in writing or just in general in life?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think there's actually been a lot of criticism, and a lot of pushback in both like building helpful ways and not. Um, I think part of that has to do even with what came before I ever, got into writing or artistry. I worked in fields with heavy criticism and pushback, and where you had to like back up your opinions. I had a friend who once says, "Why do you reference and cite when you talk?" And I'm like, because that's, there's a reason behind that. And I think that helps build a little bit of a thick skin. I'm also married to a very, very honest, blunt, overly specific man who knows exactly what he likes, and my stuff isn't it. So there's also been like he respects it and he's like, I'm happy for you, but like art for him is like picture perfect. And in my
Mm,
mind, like we have a camera now. Like if it's not weird or funky or changing the visuals
mhm,
in some way that makes it interesting, so I can see a little bit of the inside of the artist. If it looks like a photograph, I just click it with a camera. So we have
mm.
complete opposite opinions. And I think it's not criticism per se directly, right? But I think it's strengthening in the sense of like, I can't help myself. I always go woo woo and like philosophical on everything. So I'm sorry, I'll have to answer that way. I talked to my son about how like somebody disagreeing with you and you engaging in a conversation of discomfort will only change your mind if you're wrong. Because if you're not wrong, what happens is you understand your opinion better and you understand your perspective better. So I'd say not being fully understood or not having full praise from everybody who came into contact with the project helped me embrace what it was and not try to be what it wasn't. So I'm not trying to, there's no pretension here of being a kind of artist I'm not. And so it helped me kind of stay within the realm of what I am trying to do. And that is actually strengthening. But there was Janine Lip, and I can totally link to her Instagram. It's amazing.
Mhm.
She teaches art, and she teaches art at the elementary school level as well. So when I said I approached this as a kindergartner, she was the first person who told me this was art. Like I was at a writer's convention, had just met her. I was literally playing with the book. I went to a nearby Target or Walmart or whatever, this was in Canada, and bought literally a little box of, finger paint for kids, and was doing that in the hotel room. And at one point I had the book in my bag, and she saw it and she was like, this is art. And I'm like, no, I'm just like playing with paint. She's like, no, this is like a real thing. So she gave me tips on like little color things, and there was a page or two where she was like, you need something in this corner and there's balance. So there was feedback there, but I think the main thing was even her giving me the title of artist, which was pretty magical. Her and Martha Williams are two amazing artists. So I think we need people to reflect back to us.
That is incredible. How awesome. What a great serendipitous experience. Like, and that's another thing. It's the kind of clash of different worlds all happening. Like you're walking with your student and these things happen. Like there's all types of things that lead you to where you are,
Yes,
which it really is beautiful. I think I always love
absolutely.
to hear about that. You say you get woo woo, but I don't think it's woo woo. I think the universe is a pretty cool place. It's a pretty scary place, but it's
Yeah,
everything. So it's so nice
like open sensors and
yeah. Well, while I prepare for interviews, I like to find the right vibe in my
Mhm.
when I go to create questions or think about what I'm going to talk about. And before speaking with you, I listened to the song Paperbacks by Arlo Parks. Is there anything that you indulge in, any other creative, like a song, a movie, something you read before you prepare to work on your art?
Oh, that's a really good question. Um, I was probably a very I'm not completely a type, but I was very organized with my time in my past. I've become increasingly less so. So no, I have like no, there's nothing. I'm literally all over the place. So at times recently I've been doing a lot of work with anime in the background because I have a 16-year-old who's fanatic about anime, and he'll say like, Mom, you're not gonna like this, but I love you and you love me and I love this and I would love to share. He's like nailed how to get me to watch. So it's not exactly inspiring, but that's kind of what's in the background. Sometimes I'll listen to music, but sometimes the music isn't like, I'm literally all over the place. There's no time, there's no real rhyme or reason. I do not have a ritual. I have a space, but I'll do whatever anywhere. One of my favorite paintings that I did was one day, the coffee filter folded. Has that ever happened? Like I make
It's
coffee
the
with the
nightmare.
filter.
It's a nightmare. And the little grounds of coffee are in
Exactly.
your
So the ground,
coffee.
the coffee. So then I literally like pulled it out and fixed it. But then the puddle of grounds and like really strong coffee. So I took a paintbrush and I like watercolored with the coffee. It's one of my favorite paintings that I've done. I love it. It's like this woman walking on this road and it's coffee. I call it grounded. So it's like, yeah.
Oh, I love
So anything and everything. I have one that was flower girls. I got this great bouquet and just like I used coffee to make the face and tea for like the eyes and stuff. So there is no rhyme, reason, ritual, anything. And I think that's part of why I'm so all over the place, because the influences are, whatever is happening at the time.
after meeting you, I don't think that there's anything that you or coffee can't do. I'm just saying, I think it's pretty incredible. Could you give us a little bit of information on where we can get your book, where it's available, and where people can see your work?
Absolutely. So the book, this is what it became, right? There's like a print version of it, and inside you can see all the pages. So this is available on Lulu. There's a link both on my website and on Full Mood. And my work is easy to see on the website. I have like the publications and there's visual art and the writings there. I also have an anthology called Duets. And that one is the PDF is free, and the print version is also for sale through the website and then through Lulu. And that one is just about over 40 writers and friends and editors that I've worked with in the past, and I made visual art for each one of their pieces. So that's why it's called Duets. And so both of those are in the website. I'm
I'll put
assuming
all the
there's a
links.
way to link it,
Yes,
but it's
I'm going to
Amy
put
Book
everything there.
Whisper.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. I'll have all your links in the description of the video. And I'm actually I'm getting very excited because I know what I'm getting my friend Lori for her birthday, for Christmas. She's the
That's
person
super
who told me
fun.
about the fine poetry. So I'm like super. I got to tell her not to watch this though until after her birthday in a few weeks.
Oh, yeah, because now yeah. When
I've
is her
spilled the
birthday?
beans.
Yeah.
September 22nd.
Oh, you're fine. Like there's yeah.
Awesome. Amy, thank you so much for joining us here at A
My
Word.
pleasure.
And I hope to have you back sometime. So we'll keep in
Absolutely.
contact. That would be
Yes,
great.
absolutely.
Thanks so much.